This session is entitled Opening Doors in Life and Career. Brief introduction, my name is Stuart Matan-Lithwick. I've been a part of the FFB, or it's been a part of my life, really, for about 14 years. I was diagnosed with RP in 2003. At the time, I was working in the lab studying retinoblastoma, which is an eye cancer. Since that time, I actually left the lab, became a high school teacher, taught for about 3 or 4 years, and since have returned to the lab, I'm now working with Valerie Wallace, who was mentioned in the first opening session today. And we're studying cone photoreceptors in her lab and looking at how we can use it, hopefully, eventually, to be able to treat blindness. So I just want to really thank some of the people who are really sponsoring this session. So the Royal Bank of Canada Foundation, as well as the Hospital for Sick Children, which actually sponsors another program of the Foundation fighting blindness, which is entitled Youth Space, which is a great opportunity for people from 12 to 29 to get in contact with each other, to support each other, share experiences, and really be able to share things that worked for them of life with vision loss. And without further ado, please give a warm welcome to Mark DeMontis.
Excellent. Thank you very much, and good morning, everyone. And I hope the conference so far is turning out to be what you wanted, with a lot of great opportunities to engage yourself with a lot of the booths and exhibits here and everything out there to offer. I had the privilege of speaking at the Vision Quest in Calgary recently, which was great until I had told them that I was aspiring to be a Toronto Maple Leafs fan growing up. And although limited vision, I slowly started seeing people walk out the room slowly. That actually didn't happen, no. But there was a handheld mic, and I think at one point I walked out the room accidentally. So first of all, I would like to thank you for the kind introduction. And I sometimes take a seat back and think about all the different things and the adventure, I call it, I've been on for the past 10 years since being affected by vision loss. And often people ask me, say, Mark, are you sad? Are you down? Are you upset about, being visually impaired? And of course, that question is coming from a sighted person. And I say, you know what? It's funny because the past 10 years have been literally the best 10 years of my life, even though it's been about 50% of my life. And not that the 10 years before that weren't bad at all, but I'll tell you why they were. Because not only did I get to experience some things that most people at age 27 don't get to experience, but I got to meet Canadians from all walks of life, from coast to coast, who I like to say have inspired me more than I've even tried to inspire them. And that started at the Hospital for Sick Kids in the summer of 2004, when I was told the unfortunate news of being diagnosed with this rare condition, Leber's optic neuropathy. I usually say by a show of hands, has anyone ever heard that? But I never end up getting any results that way. So just by a clap of the hands, has anyone ever heard of Leber's optic neuropathy? Perfect. Thank you. Well, thanks. That's great. I'll see you guys another time. And so I was being diagnosed with this condition, and it actually literally came from left field. And I wasn't expecting it at all. And it's unfortunate because most eye conditions that people get diagnosed with, you either A, have the expectation that it's going to be happening at some point in your life, or B, you have no expectation it happens, and that can be very tough. And I'm sure there's some of us in the audience who have been through that in their own personal lives, and for myself, it's no different. I remember exactly the moment doctors told me that I was being diagnosed with this condition, and in some ways it felt like I was being arrested. And I'll tell you why. Because I was sitting there, my head was down, I felt like I was being told this news as if I had did something wrong. Doctors had asked for my driver's license. I guess they legally had to confiscate it. Rightfully so. We don't want anyone out there like me driving, that's for sure. And so I gave them my driver's license. They handed me a stack of papers that's about maybe 3 inches thick, about information regarding my diagnosis that they were giving me at the time. That was pretty tough, being 17 at the Hospital for Sick Kids, being told that A, I would never drive again, B, I would lose the central sight in both my eyes in 6 months, and C, being said, thank you, and you're on your own. But I wasn't on my own. Luckily, with a great family, great group of friends, and great community behind me here in Toronto, where I was born and raised, I had that initial support through the early stages of the diagnosis. And I think what really kept me going, and this is really the kudos to the Hospital for Sick Children here in Toronto, where I spent my time through the diagnosis. At 17 is kind of a time when you're slowly starting to become an adult, and starting to realize the small appreciations in life, and what really matters, and what doesn't matter as much. And spending time at the Hospital for Sick Kids that week made me realize that although I was losing sight, it made me really ask myself if losing sight was as big as what some of the other kids and the boys and girls at the hospital were dealing with at their time. Terminal illnesses, cancer, forms of leukemia, life-threatening conditions that in no way, shape, or form I was dealing with. I think at that point, I felt I walked out of the hospital that day, even just one day before my senior year of high school, thinking, why would I, or how could anybody give up in life losing sight when there's people out there not sure how many days their life expectancy has ahead of them? And I think that's the day I became an adult. And it's tough to say, but it's the truth. I became an adult, and becoming an adult comes with a lot of responsibility, such as having to not only accept some of the circumstances that come before you, but also in many ways having to make the right decisions as you move ahead and you progress as I move forward in my life. I spent 3 years at the University of Western Ontario studying media and PR and broadcast. I had a dream since I was a kid to be a broadcaster on Hockey Night in Canada on CBC, which was a great dream at the time, but unfortunately with Rogers and the amount of money they have now took away that dream. Yeah. So, a dream still. But that was something I always wanted to do, because I always said to myself, if I can't play in the National Hockey League and make, millions of dollars a year, I would love to still broadcast the sport, be a part of the game, and still be soaked into it, my blood, sweat, and tears, and still be able to feature inspiring hockey stories and bring to the forefront, this great national pastime of ours and all it can do. After a while, I went through a bit of a tough time in my life, as most people do who are affected by vision loss. At one point, I thought, I've accepted this condition, I'm moving on, but really it was my mind saying that and not my heart. For a number of years, I struggled with turning my back, I like to call it, to the world. And it's a big world. I'm not saying I got a big back, but I started really realizing that this was something I would most likely have to deal with the rest of my life. Having to really come to terms and cope in the understanding that this was becoming a part of me. Not so much something that happened to me now, but a part of who I am, a part of what I stand for, and had to learn to not only accept that, but to utilize it as an opportunity to provide purpose for me in my life. And that's very tough, being young, especially when you're in the midst of university and trying to really decide what you want to do the rest of your life. One day I decided to do a Google search, because the world really revolves around Google, and I mean that. I mean, anything you ever want to know, you really need to go on Google. And just a click of a button, search, you're there. And I decided to type in blind hockey, thinking, maybe blind people play hockey. You never know. And up came a website called the Eyesight, which is a Toronto-based hockey team here for the visually impaired and blind, which actually has a great exhibit just outside the room here with two of their captains, Wayne St. Dennis and Ted Moritsugu, who are leading the way with the group there. At the time, I called Ed Parento, who was the captain, and said, I just found out about the team. I have interest in trying this out, and I want to learn more. And essentially, they had me come out on a Sunday, and I remember going to the arena and not sure what to expect, going into a room thinking, I'm going to go to a blind hockey game. Not sure how it was played, not sure how fast it would be, not sure how fun it would be. And I remember walking in the room and having a dressing room full of adults who were blind and visually impaired. And if I had sight and I walked into the room, I probably still would not have noticed. It was your typical Canadian hockey dressing room. Smelled, was loud, was people asking each other for assistance, grabbing a gear or equipment, but what it was something that the rest of the world in many ways was was unaware of. It was a sport that's so universal in our country, and with blindness being so universal, it was something that meant so much to the people inside this dressing room. And I still give my credit to this day of coping with my condition and with my life, with giving that credit to those people that were in that dressing room. Because I think at the time what I really needed was just to meet others who are visually impaired and to have them really just be themselves, and to teach me that, just because you're visually impaired doesn't mean you cannot participate in sport, recreation, and live a healthy, active life. At the time, through the midst of my depression, I had gained about 60 pounds. I was about 230, 240 pounds. I really didn't leave my house in university. I really didn't attend class. I ate unhealthy food. I was on the verge of giving up. And that really was evident in my attitude, evident in my swagger. It was evident with me not even just being able to smile. And it was affection through my family, my friends, my community. It became obvious that I just was not happy. So starting to play blind hockey really gave me that chance to go back in time before I was affected by vision loss and realize that even though I was being affected by this new life-altering condition, I could still go and do what I love to do. So one day in the dressing room, I was sitting next to one of the players, and I leaned over and I said, this sport of blind hockey is great. By chance, do children across Canada who are blind or partially sighted, do they get the chance to play? Are there programs out there for youth across the nation? And I found out fast that there were no programs. And I think at that point, it hit me really hard because, since age 4, I had that opportunity growing up in my community to participate in minor hockey. And it hit me so hard, I felt that I needed to do something about it. And I remember spending days and days and days thinking that it's just unfair. It's just unfair to think that every day in our world, in our country, boys and girls get affected by vision loss. And in their classrooms, out of 30 kids, there could be 29 kids who participate in minor hockey associations. And for one child to not have that opportunity just didn't seem right. And the way I was raised and the person I felt I had become, I needed to do something about it. And that's when I decided to found Courage Canada, which at the time was very conceptual. It was an idea of helping children and helping youth who face these obstacles get this equal opportunity. It's a pretty big undertaking for someone who was only 21 to essentially say, I'm going to go and change the world. Because most people say, well, Mark, everybody wants to change the world, and everybody has the next best idea, and everybody wants to help someone, but it truly doesn't happen overnight. And that's the truth. It doesn't happen overnight. But one thing I felt I had on my side was youth. I was young. I was 21. Who am I talking? That was only 6 years ago. But I was 21, and I realized, this is something that I'm willing to devote the rest of my life to. This is something I'm willing to spend the hours, the days, the years, because that's how serious I feel this is to Canada. That's how serious I feel that these children deserve this opportunity. And so like any question someone asks when you're about to start something is, well, how are you going to pay for it? Very similar to what I remember my parents used to say to me, wanted to buy something, ever. It's like, Mom, I want to buy this new video game, or I want to buy this, or I want to buy that. Mark, how are you going to pay for it? In this case, I couldn't just look at my parents with open eyes and say, well, I was thinking maybe, you. You have a job, Mom, Dad, you have a job. Together, you have 2 jobs. That's dual income, Mom and Dad. And I learned that in school, dual income. And dual income families, Mom and Dad, they do really well. And they just, knowing me, said, Mark, that's enough. I had to find ways to not just prove to people how serious I was about this endeavor I was taking on. I had to prove to myself that this was something I was actually serious about doing. I was fortunate to be inspired by my mentor at the time, who took on a journey of their own, a gentleman named Chris Delaney. If that name sounds familiar, it's because in 1997, he went across Canada on a 2-seater tandem bike to raise money for eye research across Canada, and raised a few $100,000 for eye research. And I thought to myself, first of all, I didn't know what a two-seater tandem bike was. And when I found out that's two people that can ride a bike, I said, that's pretty cool. So I remember going to my brother's room and saying, hey, dude, you got to check this out. Showing him a video of a two-seater tandem bike and saying, I can just kind of sit at the back and you can kind of just pedal and that'll be that, And it didn't work out that way. A door was quickly shut. But I remember sitting in my room one day and I was still thinking about these kids and I was thinking about the fact that, there's not just kids in Toronto who are visually impaired. There's not just kids in Saskatchewan. There's not just kids in, BC. There's not just kids in Newfoundland, where I actually was just the past week spending time. There's kids all across this country from coast to coast, the provinces, the territories that face these obstacles. And I looked over at my bedside thinking one night, and down on my floor was a pair of rollerblades. And I looked over those rollerblades, and I don't know why they were there or who put them there, but I said to myself, wouldn't that be cool to strap on a pair of rollerblades and skate across Canada to raise funds and raise awareness about Courage Canada? It's great we had a website, but when there's no funds coming through the door, it's very hard to put and implement programming, especially for kids. So on June 27th, 2009, I embarked on a journey of a lifetime and strapped on a pair of rollerblades from my hometown community here in Toronto, Weston, and decided to skate across 5 provinces and 5,000 kilometers to Vancouver to raise funds and awareness to start programming for Courage Canada. And how serious I had to be to prove to myself to start the charity, I had to also be very serious myself to embark on a journey like this. I bet we could all imagine how my mother reacted when walking into the kitchen and letting her know that I was thinking about going for a skate. No, not a far skate, just a skate in the neighborhood. Really, Canada's just a neighborhood we all live in. Stop signs, I'll be safe. And I think what really gave me the motivation was that my family and my nucleus of support was so on board with this idea that I started realizing that people were slowly starting to believe me. They were starting to believe in me. They were starting to realize how serious I was. So for 111 days, 3.5 months, I spent each day going about roughly 50 to 80 kilometers a day on 8 wheels, getting right inside communities, meeting with families, boys and girls, meeting with adults, meeting with people who have faced this obstacle I faced. And I was really a man on a mission trying to create programming. And every day I skated, I would think more and more of the cause and what it was that we were trying to do, and skating with my guides and my 3 friends I brought along with me. And I sometimes had to pinch myself thinking that I don't actually enjoy pinching myself, but that's not because it actually hurts. But I had to pinch myself thinking that this was something that meant so much to me. But there were tough days, similar how there's tough days for anybody. Being stuck sometimes in the middle of the prairies and only going 5-10 kilometers, in 4 or 5 hours for various reasons. It would be frustrating. I felt as if I was not helping anybody. I felt as if the cause was becoming stagnant. It wasn't progressing. And that was tough on me because I set out to do something and achieve something that I really wanted to make sure it impacted the lives of people. I remember getting a call from my mentor, and one of the things he said to me, he said, Mark, the most important part about this journey is not raising funds, is not raising awareness. It's being able to touch the life of one individual. And this is so true because if you can change the life of one person in our world that's around you and you can really have an impact on them, then it's a job well done. And I hadn't really met anybody where I've had that impact on this trip, on this 111 days. But going through Kelowna, BC, around Thanksgiving time, that's that fall 2009, I ended up getting a chance to meet a family who has a son at the time, 10 years old, now 15, who is legally blind, loves hockey, and really always wanted to get the opportunity to play, but unfortunately in the community, having it being difficult to participate with his sighted peers due to the realities of the sport. And I remember spending time meeting the family, and we met where else but the iconic Tim Hortons, which is really the only place you can meet anywhere in Canada. You really sit around thinking, where could we meet? Is there a Tim Hortons? Yes. Okay, perfect. So we met at Tim Hortons. So and meeting this kid really, and I call him a kid because he was a kid, really made me realize that there are children out there. It's not just an idea I have. It's not just this vision I have of helping kids. As soon as I met the first kid, it gave me that added motivation, not just to keep this cause going and not just to spend the next week making sure I actually made it to Vancouver, but it gave me the motivation to keep doing what I was doing. And it's funny because there's so many people out there that tried to provide me with the motivation. There's a lot of people that also laughed at me too, thinking, good luck. I guess you've never heard of the Rocky Mountains, but it was this 10-year-old from Kelowna, BC, Zach, that gave me that motivation. And when I crossed the finish line about a week later in Vancouver, most people said to me, Mark, you did it. You set out to what you accomplished. You set out to what you wanted to achieve. And, you must be so happy that it's all over. And for the first time, I came to terms with the fact of this endeavor that I was taking on, and I said, it's actually just begun. There's actually more than one kid out there in the country that wants to play hockey. And since that moment, the very next day, we were at it, starting again in the community with the organization Courage Canada, providing programming across the country for boys and girls in their communities. And for the past 5 years since established, we've impacted the lives of over 600 boys and girls across Canada from coast to coast who wouldn't otherwise get that opportunity to learn to skate in their community and try the sport of blind hockey. And again, I just spent the past week in Newfoundland meeting with more families, and the sport of hockey is something that we like to use at the charity as a catalyst to not just get kids to be active, but to get kids to realize that they can do anything in life if they just give it a chance. And often we see boys and girls who put on their skates and they have their Courage Canada jersey and they get ready to go and they get ready to hit the ice. And I sit there and I know that the step they're about to take on for their very first time on the ice often reminds me of the step I first took on when I was 4 years old in Toronto here, when I first got out onto the ice. And you see their parents there with them, giving them motivation. And not only is it a step on the ice for them to play the game, but it's a step on the ice for them to take their first step in life to realizing independence, to realizing the importance of building self-esteem. We live in a time right now where persons who are blind or visually impaired lead in terms of the unemployment rate for persons with disabilities, rising obesity rates, and truly an inactivity crisis for the blind and partially sighted community in Canada. And that is an issue. And so what we need to do in our communities is work together, and not just with hockey, with all sports, all forms of recreation, all leisure activities and interests. And we need to find ways to have people be active, have people take and put their best foot forward or best skate forward. And we need to find ways for them to realize that they can really accomplish and do anything. And if it's my story that has to motivate these youth to do that, or other amazing, inspiring Canadians living with vision loss that have to do that, however it is, we need to hand in hand work together in these communities to ensure that there is programming, to ensure there is funding, and to ensure that people understand that times are changing. We're not going to live anymore in a society where we're going to put up with that. And we truly aren't, because the community of the blind and partially sighted does not deserve that. They deserve to have the programs, they deserve to have the necessary funding out there, and they deserve to be active just as much as anyone else who's able-bodied, sighted, or not. And that's very important. So now at 27, we continue to work with the charity as a volunteer sitting on the board, and I continue to do my dream and living my dream of being a broadcaster as I now host the national sports program Sports Access on AMI TV, which airs every Saturday, continuing to travel across the country, literally living out of a suitcase. I said that to a kid the other day, by the way, living out of a suitcase, and he looked at me, and he was I guess he was picturing his suitcase, and he was trying to figure out how I would really weasel my way in there and zip it up and have someone else carry me and to where I had to go. And I had to really break down the figure of speech. But kids really do say the darndest things. I'm literally doing what I've always dreamed of doing. I'm traveling this great country. I'm sharing my story. But I'm also trying to feature other inspiring Canadian stories, in particular those who are blind and partially sighted, because there are so many amazing things people are doing. And this conference is one example of the great things people are doing out there. If you take a look around the exhibits here and the people that you can meet and the great, wonderful things they're doing, not only are they doing this because they love to do it, but they're doing it because they understand the importance and the need for it in society, that it will truly make a difference in the lives of people. And so events like this really give people the opportunity to take a look at what's around and what there is out there. And so I really encourage everyone here to make sure when you're meeting people, don't just realize you're meeting a representative, but you're meeting often someone who's walked in the same shoes, someone who's experienced the same things, someone who's been told, very similar to myself, and maybe others here, no, you can't achieve this, or no, you can't accomplish that because of the situation you're in. And it's funny when I still get that to this day, meeting people that say, well, how do you broadcast? I mean, you're blind. Or how do you play hockey? I mean, you're blind. Or I mean, how do you get up in the morning and find your shoes? I mean, you're blind. I mean, and I sit there thinking, how am I putting up with this person? That's the real question. People always ask me, and they say, just to wrap up before we take a Q&A, people always ask me, Mark, what drives you and what keeps you going? And I still don't know that answer. All I do know is when I sit on an airplane traveling across this great country and I look out the window off my peripheral that I can barely see, the figure of clouds, and I can definitely feel turbulence, that's for sure, but I can't, in terms of seeing clouds, and I think to myself, even though I cannot see what's out there in this world we live in, the one thing I know is no matter how many kilometers we click in, there will always need to be change. And sometimes it literally takes zipping up that suitcase, throwing on your coat, and getting there and making sure you get right into these communities and you meet these individuals who are inspiring the country and you start providing them with the necessary exposure that they deserve. I'm just one person. Together in a room, we can make the world of a difference. And together across this great city of Toronto and across the country, we can make the world of a difference for many people. So please use my story as one example, not the example, but one example, as there are many here today, to go out in your own lives, get active if it's an opportunity you need, or lend a helping hand to someone who needs that opportunity that many others get. And it will really make the world of a difference. And I know that because I'm standing here today. So thank you, everyone.
Mark, that was very inspirational. For those of us who are sighted, many of us may not realize just the barriers that are there for full participation in society. But I want to ask you a lot of questions, but I want to ask you most importantly about your mentor. You mentioned in brief that your mentor. Can you talk a little bit about the relationship, how you came to know each other, and how he's been worked with you over the years? For sure.
And first of all, thank you very much. And it was so my aunt is actually a columnist here in Toronto with the Toronto Sun, and she was doing she's a food writer, and she was doing a feature on an individual at the time who was launching a business called YoPro Treats, fast food frozen yogurt, 100% healthy, zero fat. I know, crazy. Anyway, she was telling me this, and I didn't really know where she was going with it. But the individual who founded it, Chris Delaney, was someone who I guess read about my story at one point and was eager to meet me, that's more or less how I came to meet Chris. We've had a great relationship over the years, and he really helped me through that skate, as there was a lot of days I really needed to call him. And to this day, we still keep in touch, and he continues to lend a helping hand in the community, be active, and do really great things. Having that mentor really gave me something to strive for. He, has a great wife, eager, very entrepreneurial. In many ways, I looked at the person I wanted to become and realized that he was, someone who had the same eye condition that I had, and it just felt like there was a reason we had our cross had passed and the stars had aligned. And I'm really thankful for that chance to meet him. And I think mentors come and go. They really do. I have a lot of individuals that really lend me a hand, and people I seek advice with all the time. And I have to say, Chris aside, the one thing I've really learned through the experience with Chris is the importance of asking questions and really utilizing these mentors, people who have experienced the same things I have or we have, and asking the questions, and they really, truly will answer them. And so I think that's what Chris really lent a hand with me, and I owe a lot of credit to him.
Hi, Mark. It's David Brown. Love your inspiration, and I applaud you for continuing to get the voice out there through Sports Access and all your public engagements. That there's lots of sports opportunities out there for people that are visually impaired. I've been very fortunate to participate in the Ice Owls, the Trailblazers, Go Ball, all sorts of things, and of course, blind sailing. A couple things that I think you didn't mention that it would be nice to mention is, well, I'll mention for you, this Sports Access show is online at ami.ca website.
Yep.
And you had a great 1-hour segment there on beep baseball. So if anybody wants to know all about beep baseball and the World Series, Mark did a great thing, and it's online, and anybody can get it any time.
I guess you saw the rant. I got a little passionate. Long story short, and thank you for bringing this up, but long story short, there's a World Series, beep baseball, and there was not one team representing our country. And I had a problem with that.
Right. So I think.
But thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah, it's great. So I think a number of us that are organizing blind sports are definitely interested, and maybe we can pull together to make that happen. Pull our resources and the people that we work with. The other thing, the question is, do you have a date, time, location for the annual hockey tournament for this year?
Very good question. You're great. I got to take you everywhere I go. You're great. You're great. I do, in fact, and it's great you brought that up, because there's so many projects Courage Canada is doing that I often forget about them and the impact they're having. But this one, which is great, David, is that it's in Toronto. It's its third year. It's taking place February 13th through 15th, 2015, at the historic Maple Leaf Gardens, now Mattamy Athletic Centre at the Gardens. All information on that, again, our website's the number one place, couragecanada.ca. Tomorrow is actually a big feature they're doing on Rogers Sportsnet's Hometown Hockey on City TV. Ron McLean is doing a big feature on the organization and a build up to this tournament. So if you can tune in tomorrow to Hometown Hockey, it'll definitely give you more about that tournament. But as you noted, if there are sporting opportunities, that you'd like to see some more exposure with, definitely contact AMI. I can tell you this: if there's any network in Canada that actually cares about the interests of their viewers, it's AMI. And if you have ideas for things that could be covered, not just with Sports Access, but with any opportunities and outlets, definitely get in touch, and that's ami.ca.
Thank you so